sometimes you have moments where there's an emotion or a mood or a situation where you're shooting really quickly and you don't always have time to set things up properly to really get the settings you want, or to redirect your subjects or anything like that. So here we were just walking along this boardwalk, and we just had a moment where we had stopped and they had had this cute moment, and through my own response of working through this bright sunlit morning, I underexposed. And I underexpose so that I don't lose detail. I'd rather have an underexposed photo than overexposed, because I know that I can fix this in editing. So, so you can see here the sunlight's coming from their left. I would have, had I had the opportunity to really work through this, I would have moved myself to the right and put the sun behind me, or more behind them. But it's still nice. I mean, you can see her hair's a little sunlit, and it's a really sweet scene. So there are a few things that I think are important for a scene like this, and this is easy where, like, you can see I underexposed. Here, let me show you my settings. You can see that I underexposed, not too much, right? Like, I didn't lose any detail as if I was overexposing also, to where I'm having to pull up the exposure so much that it gets grainy or gritty, or there's color noise or anything like that. So you can see I'm at ISO 200. I'm using my 7200 lens, f2.8 and 1/4000th of a second. Now that's a pretty high shutter speed for this situation, but because I shot at such a higher exposure, I was able to not blow out, any of these areas here along her face, her teeth, her hair, or even on the back of his shirt. I could have lost a lot of good detail here, and it probably would have been fine. Like here, you can still see if it had been overexposed, you can see that, like, it's not too bad. But the light, had I shot at, say, 1/2000th of a second, would have completely washed this out. So instead of being this lovely illuminated outline, it would have been just a white, a wash look, to where this detail would have been further in on his shirt, and same for on her. So thankfully, I can go ahead and pull up the exposure quite a bit, and pull up my contrast. I'm going to keep working to where it's really their skin that I'm looking at here. I want their skin to look lively. You can see as you underexpose, it's kind of dull. It's a little more, like, if I take out the contrast here, it makes it look really flat and just drab. So I need to pull in some contrast to enhance some detail. But then you also, if I left it at a lower exposure look like this from my slider here, it's a little dark and it's a little unflattering on the lines of their faces here, which, that's fine, it's real life, but the idea here is that we want this to be a flattering image for them. We don't want them to look at this and be like, ugh, I can see my wrinkles, it just doesn't look pretty. So this is probably where I'm going to bring this image, and you can see here the shadows. Look at what a difference that makes. But again, and these are not adjustments I would typically make, but because the sun is coming in at a unique angle, I love this photo. They look so sweet and so happy. It's just such a tender, fun moment that I'm so glad that I captured. This is where I will bring up those shadows, because again, I really want them to be exposed nicely. I want the detail on their skin to be the one that I focus on the most. And if you saw, I hit the auto setting button, just to kind of see what it would do. And sometimes that can help, sometimes it doesn't. I take these off. I don't want the color messed with unless I'm going in to do that myself. I'm going to further adjust the crop, and you can see already the difference here. Now this is a photo that I'm sure that I could leave it in a darker, moodier scene like this, and it would look just fine. But every time I look at it, at least for my personal taste, actually that doesn't look too bad, but for my personal taste, I'm going to keep looking at this and I'm going to think what a bright, beautiful morning it was, and I want to stay true to that scene. And that's just my own personal preference. I can't necessarily help that that's how I see it. But I still think it's going to be beautiful. I'm going to adjust the light here in the tone curve just a smidge. I love that little pop of light right there. Now this is one image area. Fix the lens corrections here. Big difference. And because of the lens correction, I can easily go back up here and pull my exposure down a touch. But if I go down here to the post-crop vignetting, and this is a scene where I think you can definitely get away with doing a full vignette around every corner of the photo, and it's actually going to bring your eye further into the couple and not be so distracted by the light. I honestly think that looks really good. It gives you just enough of the color through here. And it just looks, I love the kind of the dark color of the green in the background. But if that's not what you want to do, and that's not often what I want to do, here we have in the effect option, or sorry, in the graduation filter, I can adjust the exposure myself, or we can go down here to burn highlights, and that's going to adjust my settings here for me. So it's going to drop my exposure down -0.5 and highlights -50, and that's quite a lot. But that's what it says for burn highlights, so that's what we're going to try. So I would, because the sun is coming from the left, this is the side that would be darker because she's here. As you can see, that doesn't do much. I'll pull that in more. I'll drop the exposure a little bit more. We want to keep it really natural, so we need to be careful about overdoing it. I would then put another one down over here. And that looks pretty sweet. I think that could work, but I'm a little distracted by the negative space right here with how light and bright it is. And again, that's where I'm going to come back to the post-crop vignetting, and it makes me want to add more. Or add a little bit to the whole frame, and you can't really see a difference as much in the top, a little bit over here, but not so much, not that in a distracting way. But what I like about having done both the graduation filter and the post-crop vignette is that it keeps this side even darker, just a little bit darker than the rest, and that I think gives you more of a natural feel to how the light would have been situated. Because we're going to look at the light in this sense as it's kind of ending on them. They're the focal point of the light. So anything over here, we're going to go ahead and let kind of be darkened and get lost so that the light stops on the couple. It's coming from the left, and instead of letting it completely wash out through the whole photo, it's like you're giving a stoplight effect. And I think this looks pretty good. You can see again, here's a before and after. And the details are just right. I think the light is just right. And this is all going to go based on personal preference. And I think the other tricky part of this would have been the white balance. But I think it's just warm enough. Actually, I could touch it up a tiny bit. There we go. A little bit warmer here. Just because warmth means life in a photo, and you really want, I mean, this is a beautiful, lively photo, and you want that to really stand out. You want them to look and feel very alive, very in the moment and real, not too cool, even though the morning was very blue. It was probably more like this. A lot of the photos had very much this blue tone to it. So just livening that up just a touch. I mean, doesn't that just make them look so just... bam, so alive, so just, I don't know, wonderful. You can go down further in split toning. I always take my highlights a little to the blue red tone here and just bump it up a tiny bit. Doesn't look too bad. Shadows I keep from the orange to yellow, so the shadows are always warmer. I don't want my shadows to be too cool or blue. And so just that little adjustment, that looks just fine. If I think it's a little too orange, I'm going to pull it to the right. It looks a little too pink, so I'm going to pull the slider back to the blue a little. Looks a little too pink for what I'd like. I can bring it back to the left. It goes back to I'm close to the greens over here, so you can see that. But you get that balance in there, and that's just a really harmonious, balance between the blues and the reds, and then the yellows and the greens. And again, just so much life, so much beauty. And that, to me, that's a lovely photo. I'd be perfectly happy sending this off to the couple. There's always those little nitpicky things you could keep adding to it, but that's great. And honestly, if you're worried a little bit about these highlights, you can see it's a little bit bright right here. Drop your highlights down a touch without having to lose the exposure that I just did. Bring up the shadows a bit if you'd like, but I really don't want to lose the contrast detail either. So that's how I would edit this slightly difficult lighting scene, keeping the couple well exposed, making sure their skin is warm, that the blue coolness of the morning, even with a bright light, isn't competing with the warmth of the sun that I was able to pull out through camera. So I hope you found this helpful.